Oh, hello there, and welcome back to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini. Shabbat Shalomini to the Broccolodini. This week, our episode is on the topic of cannabis in ancient rituals and ritualism. Perhaps more in general. And as we like to say on the show, red the boy, blue his mother. I'm sorry, that was an official stoner check. If that didn't make you giggle, then you are not stoned enough to be listening to this episode. And I will have to kindly ask you to get the fuck off of my channel. Also, yes, I did get the colors red and blue mixed up, which proves that I am stoned enough to be making this episode. Over the course of this topic on cannabis in ritualism and ancient rituals, we will be discussing Paleolithic Stoned Egyptian gods, Israelite shrines, the I Ching, Siberia, and tent hotboxing. And don't forget to hang around to the end of the show when there will be a first special Broccolodini podcast interview with my girlfriend, who has a master's degree and did her dissertation on this very subject of cannabis in ritualism. It turns out the ancestor of the cannabis sativa appeared out of nowhere on the Himalayan steppe in the plateau of the Himalayas alongside Tibet and India about 28 million years ago. But it didn't quite appear out of nowhere. In fact, it evolved like everything else that lives and is very closely related to the humulus plant from which the hops, so popular in beer, also arise. Cannabis indica later split off during some Ice Age events about 1 million years ago. And it is here in the heartland of Asia where our story of ritual cannabis use begins. Yes, in the tradition of the ancient Chinese mystical magical medicine, which I mentioned in the previous episode, cannabis was employed as a method of healing since about 6,000 years ago, or a little more. The legendary Chinese hero Fu He, who invented the I Ching, a fantastic Chinese system of divination and magic, which is rather similar to the Kabbalah, in that in some way it helps us to understand the universe. I Ching is Chinese for the Book of Changes, and its legendary founder is also supposed, according to the legend, to have taught the ancient Chinese about the herbal use of cannabis. Cannabis was known to the ancient Chinese as Ma, and is known in modern Chinese as Dhamma. A legendary Taoist immortal, much like a goddess, Ma Gu, she was the Chinese hemp maiden, who is associated with the elixir of life and is a symbolic protector of women in Chinese mythology. Indeed, another Chinese mythical legendary hero, Shenong, the founder of Chinese herbal lore, is also supposed to have taught about hemp and cannabis to the people of ancient China, according to the legend. And this healing art quickly spread to Japan. And then down the road to India. In India, cannabis became associated with the creator god Shiva, whose cult to this day, I am told, smokes a great deal of weed on the streets of Varanasi. And we can only imagine that the incense in the shrines to the Hindu gods, especially Shiva, back in those ancient days, smelled pretty good. From far Southeast Asia, the use of ritual cannabis spread into the Middle East and into Russia and Siberia. Siberian shamans from the 5th century BCE have been found buried with bags of weed. And Herodotus, the Greek historian par excellence, given the nickname of the father of history, writes of the Scythian 5th century BCE Russian Siberian practice of gathering inside of tents where cannabis and hemp stalks or hemp are burned on hot coals in the center of the tent. According to Herodotus, this would make the local Scythians jump with joy and shout. So we can only assume the weed must have been pretty good. And if you think the ancient Egyptians were not having fun with weed, well, you'd be wrong. Because the ancient Egyptians were well known to mix cannabis into their incense. And the Egyptian goddess Seshat is shown with a hemp leaf as her headdress. She was the goddess of writing, knowledge, measurement. And hemp at the time was used to make measuring cords. Cannabis pollen was found on the mummy of Ramesses II, the famous Ozymandias, as the Greeks called him. The ancient Egyptians liked to mix cannabis with henbane and burn it. And if you would like to have the ancient Egyptian experience, I suggest mixing your weed with henbane and hitting it from a water pipe. But perhaps the most stunning findings in the past 5 years on the subject of cannabis and ancient ritualism was the ancient Israelite shrine, 8th century BCE, in Tel Arad, which is made from the biblical specifications for the temple in Jerusalem. And in this Jewish period of Yahwist religion, as it is currently called, the idea that there could only be one temple forever wasn't exactly hammered out amongst everyone involved in the Jewish religion or people yet. The Tel Arad shrine was part of a larger fortress that was supposed to serve as a home away from home for the Jewish kings of the First Temple period. Those would be the dynastic sons of David and Solomon, some of whom were lucky enough to be pictured on Assyrian tablets in which they are shown surrendering. The Tel Arad shrine features into this episode because 2 altars inside of the shrine At the threshold between the main temple space and what would have been the Holy of Holies, were tested for the contents of the resins in the center of the incense altars. And one was found to be burning frankincense, while the other was found to be burning hash. Indeed, THC was found to be the main component burned in the second smaller altar, pictured in the background image of this episode, along with Magoo and Sheshat. Yes, the THC was discovered along with animal dung, which was used as the burning coal, and which apparently burned low heat enough that it would not evaporate all the hash at once, but release it nice and slow. These findings have led many to believe, what some already did, that cannabis use was probably in practice in the ancient Israelite Temple of Solomon. Oh, hello there, and welcome back to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini. And now, without further ado, the first ever and extra special Broccolodini podcast interview. Well, I'm very excited to have our guest on the show. Will you please introduce yourself and tell us about what you do or have done in this context? Yeah, a little preliminary information about yourself and your academic work, education, or something.
Sure. Hi, Fred. I'm happy to be on the show. My name is Jen Paradise. I have my master's in East-West Psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies, with a focus in entheogenic shamanism and indigenous traditions. I also did some research in my coursework about spiritual uses of cannabis and how to create new ritual in Western culture.
Thank you for introducing yourself to our lovely listeners. So, I have a few questions for you. First off, if you were an ancient shamanic priest, would you burn cannabis on an altar in an enclosure, mix it with henbane and smoke it from a water pipe, or make it into a potion with ginseng and rub it up your butt?
You know, I'd have to go the traditional route and hotbox the altar, but boofing a ginseng potion does sound sort of fun.
I'd have to agree with you there. So my next question is ritual cannabis these days only for goofy white cult leaders with PhDs?
Hell no. I think cannabis has always been a plant for the people. It's one of the most ubiquitous and accessible plant medicines there is. It grows on almost every continent. It's easy to grow. It's extremely resilient. I think it's great that it's becoming more popularized and studied by academics as more like a ritual and spiritual medicine, even a psychedelic in some contexts. But the beauty of ritual is that it doesn't have to be something gatekept by so-called shamans, cult leaders, or academics. A ritual can be something as simple as coming home from work every day and smoking a bowl, or getting together with friends and having a cannabis-infused dance party.
Thank you for that. So which ancient culture speaks to you the most in its cannabis rituals?
Well, I really enjoyed learning about the Scythian funeral rites. From what I've researched, after a Scythian burial, they would hold a ceremony where they created a bonfire and would burn cannabis plants and dance around it, inhaling the smoke. Part of the ritual was intended to put them in a trance-like state to commune with their dead kin, and it was also used as a way to collectively process grief and work through sorrow. It's interesting how versatile cannabis can be in individual and collective healing, and also a cannabis funeral is super goth, so I'm into it.
I appreciate that. And since we all know now that cannabis sativa is related to hops, that leads me to my final question. Can I have one of your beers?
No.
Fuck. Thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and Shabbat Shalomi to the broccolodini or whatever you say.
And Shabbat Shalomini to your broccolodini as well, Jen. Oh, hello there. So, the use of ritual cannabis, however, did not end with the Israelite shrine at Tel Arad, nor with the Egyptians, but went on. The Carthaginian warship, which sunk off the coast of Marsala, Sicily, was recently discovered to have a bag of weed on it. The early pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Democritus, often called the laughing philosopher, frequently spoke about a plant he called potamaugus, and scholars say that this was probably cannabis. One can only imagine how much potamaugus the laughing philosopher must have been smoking. The first Roman physician, scientist, to mention the hallucinatory effects of cannabis, and not just the medicinal ones, or that is to say, the recreational effects of cannabis, and not just the medicinal or industrial uses of hemp, was the Roman physician Claudius Galen, who lived in the 2nd century CE, but he was certainly not the first Roman to get intoxicated on it. And as the eastern half of the Roman world was absorbed into the new Arab world that arose in the 600s of the Common Era, hashish became inextricably linked with the new Muslim Islamic spirituality, especially in its early Sufi iterations. And it is from Arabic that we get the word kaif, which means pleasure, and which we use to describe the little green dust that it produces. And it's here that the ancient world ends. And so does our episode. Thank you all very much for listening to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini. The Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini is brought to you by Shangdong's Ancient Chinese Finger Trap Blunt. Only available in Colorado while supplies last. Shabbat Shalomini to the Broccolodini. Until next time, my friends.